Hello guys and welcome to camera explanation in three-dimensional space. So this will be maybe a two-part video series where I will explain some stuff about cameras. Because if you want to make cool looking images or nice looking animations, for example, you need to know real-world camera stuff, in my opinion. So, first of all, I will explain you the focal length and what the focal length is. So, let's get started. This is a simple image here. So, for example, you've got your subject and you got your camera with your sensor and your lens. The distance between the lens and the sensor will be the focal length. When you got, for example, a 90mm lens, the focal length or the distance between the lens and the sensor is way longer than, for example, a 24 wide angle lens. Another thing, when the focal length is longer, the angle of view will get smaller. If the focal length is shorter, then the angle of view will get bigger. Let's take these images here, for example. This is a 90mm macro lens, and you can see the image is pretty compressed. Another thing is that you will get with a macro lens and a pretty wide opened f-stop, you will get pretty shallow depth of field. When we take, for example, a wide angle macro lens, you can capture a lot with this, so you will get a wide angle of view. For example, this is in focus, the insect here, but you will capture also the background. So with a lens like this here, 90mm, you can really focus on an object, and because of the really high shallow depth of field, you can isolate the object. So I'm now in Houdini and let's get some examples here. First of all, we need a geometry or a simple scene so we can visualize that. Let's call this geo test and dive inside. Let's just save this quick to outsourcing. Whoops. First of all, we need an object so we can work on that a little bit. And why we don't take some bunch of spheres. So let's create a geometry here, a sphere geometry, and dial up the frequency here a little bit. Then we will get an VDB from polygons and make a simple density VDB here. And now you can see this is a density volume with a voxel size of 0.1, that's up here, and 4129 voxels. Now we want to scatter some points into that volume, so let's gather maybe 10 points. Now we want to copy other spheres onto that points. We will do this with the copy to point sub. Let's connect this, get a sphere, and now we will get something like this. So pretty simple. Now we want to get different sizes on the spheres here. We can do that with a simple attribute randomize. Let's rename this to rand pscale and call it here pscale. So pscale is a built-in attribute in Houdini, and it will randomize the scale when a geometry is copied. For example, let's switch that to, where is it? The custom ramp, and let's get a smallest size to 0.25. Let's delete this one here and let's change the seed a little bit. Now we will place down another VDB from polygons, so we get even mesh out of that. Make the voxel size a little bit smaller and convert it back to polygons. Let's get this here a little bit better resolution. What we also can do, we can get a VDB from, let's look it up, VDB to spheres. That's a pretty cool node too. Let's disable overlapping and dial up the spheres here. Let's get the sphere radius a little bit down, and you will end up with something like that. So if you want to do a really simple sphere packing, you can use the VDB to spheres node. That's pretty cool too. So we converted this here to polygons and dial up the resolution again a little bit. Get this resolution here up too. For the last step, let's move that a little bit out here. Strength of 50 and filter quality 1. And after that we will get here a nice even smoothing on the geometry. Get a null in the end. Let's call it out test for our focal length stuff and depth of field stuff. And place down a material node. So mat out test. For example, you can collapse this whole thing with Shift C, and let's call it geo. Cool. So we got our test geometry here. Now we need to create the render setup. So as usual, place down a shopnet and a ROP network. Call this redshift and call this out. Let's color both in red and create one redshift network here and call this, for example, rsmat test. So this is for that geometry here. Let's dive inside, create an rs material. And now we want to connect them here. So you can choose your technique to connect that stuff, but I usually press Shift and W and just drag and drop the material to the material here. Or another technique you can do, just click here and then go to your Redshift shop and accept the material. Now we've got our simple test geometry here. Let's go into the out network or into the Rob network and place down a Redshift custom node here, and let's call this out RS Redshift and 001. So now we need some lights. So first of all, let's do it with a simple dome light here. Let's call it RS light or RS dome 001. So for the dome light we need an HDRI map. You can get a bunch of these from HDRI Heaven or other sites. I will use the Pro Metal Studios pack for now. This is a pretty simple HDRI and I think this will do the job. Now we want to place finally the camera. So the camera is placed, and now let's get on the resolution. For example, let's get it to full HD, and full HD got an aspect ratio from 16:9, for example. If you want to get CinemaScope aspect ratio, for example 2.35, that will be the resolution 2048 by 871. So this is simple CinemaScope here. Let's try to find a good spot. So this is simple CinemaScope aspect ratio, and if you want to know the resolutions, I will link that site here down in the description, and here are pretty much any resolution for different aspect ratios. So for example, full HD is here 16:9. Then in 2K CinemaScope 2.35 to 1 is, for example, that here. So the red from red cinema cameras is 2.37, so that's that resolution. So you can look up the resolutions here. I will post the link to this site in the description. So we've got our light, we've got our camera, and we've got our geometry. So now we can just start the render view here. Go to Cam 1. Let's change the display mode to Rec 709. And we will get something like this. We got no depth of field, so this is a fully in focus object. It got no depth of field, so from here to here it's fully sharp. The material is the base material, so it's pretty reflective and got no roughness. We can change that later. This is now a simple 50mm focal length. So this is like a standard lens that you can use. Let's save this here quickly. So let's just get here another a little bit better looking material here. Let's get a roughness up. So I will choose the max on noise, and let's find here something we can play with. Place down a material blender. Let's copy this here. Let's get this to the base material, and the second material we will get this into the layer color, and the noise of course in the blend color, and change the color here, for example to something bluish. Or let's get the copper preset here, make the roughness a little bit bigger. So that's just a really quick, simple material. Let's also get a little bit of bump mapping. So place down our RS noise. That will do the job. Dial up the complex pattern here and play with the scale. Then place down a bump map. The noise will go into the input, and I will use that on the first material as a bump map. So that's of course way too high, so let's dial the values a little bit down. For example, something like 0.025. That's it for the really simple and awful looking material setup. Maybe I will change that later. For now, get on take snapshot, and we've got here a saved image with a focal length of 50 millimeters. For example, let's get a really wide angle lens. Let's go with something like 16 millimeters. Let's refresh the rendering here, and now you can see we are way farther away from the object, but also we will capture way more information from the background. So we've got, in overall, we've got a wider angle of view. When you now want to isolate the subject, or you want to concentrate on that subject or object, you need to get the camera closer. Let's call this cam 00001, and let's call it close. Let's change it back to 50 millimeters. This is our 50 millimeter, so 50 millimeter setup. Copy the camera here. Let's call this camera 2, and this will be our 16 millimeter ultra wide angle lens. Dial in the focal length, and now we need to move closer to our object. Let's get a handle here. Let's jump inside the 16 millimeter here, and yeah, there's some buggy view here. For example, hide the background here. Let's refresh that and give it a quick rendering, just with the default settings. and take a snapshot. So now when we compare these two images here, you can see the object is way bigger, so it will get way more distorted. The 50mm is a more compressed look. So let's get a compressed look, even more compressed. Let's copy the camera node again and let's dial in a focal length 200mm. So that's like a medium telephoto lens. Let's rename this to 200mm here. And go into that camera. So now we are really close to our object. Something like that. When you want now to fill the frame or the sensor with the object, you need to move further away from the subject or the object. Let's do this by zooming out here, like this. Start the render view, go to the 200mm. Let's give it a quick render here. Almost finished, and take a snapshot. So now we've got our 50mm, then our wide angle length and our medium telephoto. The difference between the medium telephoto and the standard 50mm is that this one here, the 200mm focal length, is even more compressed. So now let's go on to depth of field. That's a pretty nice topic in my opinion. Let's sort the cameras, and I will get now one of my favorite focal length. That's a 90mm macro lens. Let's dial in here 90mm. Let's go here to the 90mm camera and let's zoom in a little bit. So the defocus is right about, where is it? It's here. So go on the redshift camera and DOF. So the depth of field will say that you've got a focus point on your image or on your subject. So the focal points is, let's imagine that right here. Here is the image sharp, and after the focal point or the focus plane, the image will get blurry, and before the focus plane or the focus point, the image will get blurry too. So go into the camera and start up the render view. So we are in the 90mm camera, and go to sampling, copy the focus distance here and paste it to the focus distance into the redshift camera settings. Now we got here click to focus, so this is like a focus picker, and now you can see we've got here our focus point. After the focus point, the image will go into the depth of field radius or into the circle of confusion or conclusion, I don't know the name now, will go into that depth, and the image will get a defocus. The COC radius is the strength of the bouquet or the DOF. Let's dial that up to 5, and now you can see we've got a really small focus here. So that's our focus, And even before the focus plane, the image is blurry, and after that it's just completely blurred out. Let's dial that down back to 1. You can play, for sure, you can play with the power and with the aspect. So the aspect is something for anamorphic lenses. Let's just show you that quickly here. Anamorphic bokeh. So just duplicate this. This is a bokeh, so the blurred circles from a normal lens. They are usually round, or you can get filters, for example here the hard filter, or older lenses got only maybe 5 or 6 shutter plates. And for example, let's go to vintage, and you will see something like this here. So this is like an older vintage lens, and the newer lens has got like 9 shutter plates or even more. And the anamorphic bokeh is stretched out. So for example, something like that here, or like that. And you can use an anamorphic lens to stretch them out in both axes, so the y-axis and the z-axis, for example. Let's give it here a quick look. So this will be an aspect of 2, so the bokeh will get stretched out in this direction. And let's go to 0.25. The bokeh will heavily get stretched out in this direction. So something like 0.75 is a pretty cool anamorphic look. Another thing, let's just get this back to 1 and get a quick rendering here. And save this. So this is now saved, a snapshot. And another thing is the bokeh image. So you can use that for a custom bokeh look. So I need to find them here. Bokeh images, you can find them on the internet. Let's get the bokeh 001 here. Let's refresh here our render window. The image will get darker, but let's get it on unit intensity. But we will also get here a little chromatic aberration, or yeah, it's like false color. So on the outline you will get this pretty chromatic aberration look, and the color will split on the outside of the bokeh or on pretty bright objects, and you will get a cool look on that. For example, let's use that here instead. For now the picture is way color temperature off, so let's get this to white color sum here. But when you play around with the bokeh images, you will get an example for that. So just save that, and let's use no bokeh image. And you can see a little bit of, maybe not here like now, but let's get this with the chromatic operation again, and you can see here so for example like that, without a bouquet image, or I think it was with that one 003, and here you can see a difference between them. So I think that's it for that chapter. Maybe there will be a second chapter, but I hope this will help a little bit about the camera setup in Redshift, and this applies, I think, to any kind of render engine. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you in the next tutorial.